One of the reasons I use Linux and one of the reasons I enjoy using Linux is the customization options you get. You can completely switch around any part of your operating system so that it can work the way that you want it to work. And one of the more livelier topics of debate down in the comment section of many of these videos are what kind of desktop environment do you use and the pros and cons of using each of the various ones. So I thought that I might actually sort of do a bit more of a formal investigation as to the pros and cons of various desktop environments and then do videos talking about my experiences with them. And I'm actually going to use them for at least a week, but the first couple that are on the list I've actually used for significantly longer. And today I'm going to be talking about Cinnamon. Cinnamon is the default desktop environment available for Linux Mint. It is 4 years old according to the Wikipedia article. It was started in 2011. The latest stable release was the 1st of November 2014, as of course the time of recording. That's only 2 months ago. It's still very much in active development. Its license is GPL version 2, and it is developed by the Linux Mint team. And it's incorporated very much into the Linux Mint operating system. And it is one that I actually really enjoy using. Now, there's a bit of a colourful history behind it. Linux Mint is designed to be as appealing to as broad a user base as possible, and it's designed to be particularly friendly to Windows to Linux converts. And therefore, they want to design around their operating system around that concept and to make it somewhat similar to Windows so that people wouldn't feel too much like a fish out of water when they decided to pick up the Linux baton. Now, when GNOME 3 was released, all of you guys are probably going to be familiar with the fact that they changed around the user interface a lot in a hugely drastic way. And in ways that I got to admit, I think that I appreciate them experimenting with their user interface, and I think that it's a worthwhile experiment. But I got to admit, I felt the same way that the Linux Mint people did, and I thought that it was perhaps not going in a direction which I thought was particularly helpful. In response to this, the Linux Mint people actually started out by making a new front end for GNOME, a shell. So you had GNOME and then you had a shell on top of it, which looked very similar to how Linux Mint has always looked. And it has that kind of aesthetic that it's pretty much always had, just that single taskbar down the bottom in a very Windows-esque fashion. And they managed to do that, but for reasons that are explained on the Wikipedia page, I won't go into them too much now, they realized that just slapping on a shell on top of GNOME wasn't a long-term solution. So they decided to actually fork GNOME itself. And of course, that's one of the beauty one of the amazing aspects of using open source is that you can actually fork something if you don't agree with the direction it's going in. And they actually decided to just make a fork of GNOME that was very much within Linux Mint's vision of what a desktop environment and a user interface should be. And thus, Cinnamon was born, or at least the modern incarnation of Cinnamon. Now, there are a few differences to Cinnamon to GNOME. It has, I believe it has a file manager called Nemo, and it's got a few gadgets that kind of aren't GNOME, but it still uses the GTK Plus toolkit. And it's still very much, it's still very much a traditional, even within the Linux realms and the technical side of things, desktop environment. But it would be being forked from GNOME. It's a lot of people consider it's what GNOME 3 almost should be or should have been, and maybe that the new user interface should have been like an add-on or an alternative layout or something to that effect. Now, you can actually bring back the old classic GNOME look, the more traditional desktop look in GNOME, and I'll be looking at that later when I actually start trying out GNOME. But yeah, Cinnamon, it's very much designed for Windows converts. It's designed to be user-friendly. It's designed to be sort of easy and nice, and I've been using it for a long time now because I'm a big fan of Linux Mint, and you don't become a big fan of Linux Mint without learning a few things about Cinnamon. It's their flagship desktop environment, but it's not their only one. They also promote it alongside Mate. I know that I think it's pronounced Mate, but I being British, it just looks like Mate to me. And they promote it side by side, and I think that from a marketing standpoint is a mistake because a Cinnamon edition and a Mate edition. I mean, someone who's not used to how Linux works and not used to being able to choose your own desktop environment. I don't know why, the virtues of one over the other might not be obvious. You might have Mate as being, I don't know, you call it something like lightweight or compact, and then you'd have Cinnamon, which is like the main version, or something to that effect. But no, Mate and Cinnamon, it's Linux, and Linux distributions are still working on their marketing, but they're catching up. They're getting there. Some have got some good marketing setups, and Mint is one of the better ones, so I'm not going to be too hard on it. It doesn't make that many mistakes, but one of the mistakes it does make is that it doesn't make a too clear distinction between the two versions that it's presenting to you. And in fact, I don't know whether or not it might necessarily be more work than is worthwhile to have both of them. But yeah, I really enjoy it using Cinnamon. It's straightforward. It's pretty lightweight, really. It doesn't have too many fancy bells and whistles on it, but it's not, I wouldn't call it a lightweight desktop environment. But yeah, easy to use. It's got a control panel like you might find in Windows. It's got the panel menu. There are a few things that I am perhaps a little bit... I'm not going to be too critical of it, because it's a new desktop environment, and it's still building its user base, and it's still building its community. And it's still working itself out for its long-term strategy. So I'm not necessarily going to criticize it or compare it to GNOME or KDE, which have been around for a lot longer, because they have been around for a lot longer. But as a for a 4-year-old project, it's doing very, very well. A lot better than I actually thought it would. I thought that it would be struggling about this point, but I guess. I guess I was wrong, but anyway, yeah. Some of the things that I was a bit not too happy with, I guess that sounds a bit strong, is there's only two. The first is there's two, and there's kind of a third that's not important. The first is the third party add-ons that you can get for Cinnamon. These are things that customize the look of the menu. They allow you to mess around with the positions of the taskbar and things like that. The problem I had with it is that updating from one version of Cinnamon to another version of Cinnamon through upgrading Linux Mint, which is how I did it at the time, I found that a lot of the third-party add-ons then ceased to work. Now, that could arguably be the fault of the third-party add-on. It could be a fault of the infrastructure. I don't know, and I don't know sort of what the intentions were behind that. But I actually found that quite frustrating, because I had Mint and Cinnamon laid out exactly as I wanted to, and then I did an upgrade, which I thought was a minor upgrade, and then there were a few third-party add-ons that I was really quite getting sort of, it fit like a glove at that point. It'd be nicely worn in like a pair of jeans, and then it sort of got turned on its head. Yeah, I could downgrade and then faff around like that, but downgrading an OS or downgrading Cinnamon is... I don't know. It was more trouble than it's worth, at least in my opinion. You pick Linux Mint because you want something easy and straightforward, and if you have to downgrade to avoid a bug, that's defeating the purpose. That's defeating the objective of it, I guess, in my opinion. One of the reasons I use Linux Mint, one of the reasons I do quite like Cinnamon, is because it's a no-nonsense distribution. It's a no-nonsense setup. You install it, you go, boom. It comes with software that it comes with an existing library. It comes with like the out of the box installation. Includes software that you are likely to use, and the community are likely to use. It has a user interface that's intuitive, and it's easy. It's set up just the way you like it, right out from right out of installation. So I choose Mint because I don't want to mess around with it. So I'm inclined to push it away whenever it requires any kind of finesse. But that being said, though, vanilla Cinnamon is that's a weird turn of phrase. It's good. It's good. The second problem that I had with it was multiple monitor support, which is where the third parties came in. The third parties actually gave additional help when it came to managing things like taskbars and whatever on monitors. Right, so my setup is a little bit unique, but I'm sure there are other people with multiple monitors. I have like a big main monitor. My big main monitor is where I play games and where I do anything that requires high definition. It's nice, it's big. I have a secondary monitor, which is a significantly smaller monitor, and I use that as a side thing, for secondary programs that I might have open. It's a nice little setup, and I really, really like it. However, However, I like my big monitor to be the main monitor because whenever I play games, that's where I want the games to load up on. But I want the taskbar on the secondary monitor. That way I can manage things, sort of off the main monitor. The main monitor is almost like the stage, and then the secondary monitor is almost like the lighting and effects room, and that's how I kind of see it. So it would be. I really like having the taskbar on the secondary monitor. Also, it gives me more space on the main monitor. So the interesting and unique setup that brings is that the main monitor needs to be the primary display, whereas the taskbar needs to reside on the secondary display. Whereas Cinnamon, you don't get that nuance. It doesn't allow you. It doesn't. It doesn't extend it to you. With Cinnamon, you have to have the taskbar on the primary monitor, and there's no negotiation in regards to that. Now you can use third-party add-ons to get around that, but like I said, it came with the problem of when I upgraded, they broke. So and it wasn't just like one or two, about half of them, maybe a third of them broke. So yeah, like I say, I don't know if that's the problem with Mint or whether or not that's the problem with the third-party add-ons, whether or not it was just a problem with the infrastructure. But like I say, it's new and it's growing, so I'm not particularly condemning it for that. That is a very small criticism. That it affected me in a big way because I have a particularly unique setup. And the third, but like I say, it's a minor thing and it's not necessarily a criticism of it, it's just a criticism of it if you look at it in a particular way, is that the lack of customizability in it. The lack of customizability in it means that you can't, say, move around your taskbars and whatever. That is also in a lot of ways a positive, because if Linux is ever going to become more accessible to more kinds of people, it needs to have more GUI options, graphical options, without having to resort to the command line in order to fix any kind of problem that might arise. The command line in and of itself is a fantastic tool to use, and it is a really great way of solving problems. The only problem is, of course, with Windows converts is that they don't like dipping into the command line. I got to admit, I don't like doing it either, but it is good in the sense that it allows you to no matter how much you customize your operating system, whether or not, whatever desktop environment you use, whatever window manager you use, you've always got that command line, which is the central point. Everything remains constant on the command line, and you don't have to worry about what desktop environment you're running, what's other bits and pieces that you've customized your system with. So yeah, like I say, a little more customizability, possibly, but maybe this isn't the desktop environment for that criticism. I don't know. It's just a thought anyway. I got to admit, I am a big fan of very traditional desktop environments. I like the LXDE layout, and I was never really that big a fan of the panel option whenever you used, whenever they brought it in on Linux Mint. But it has grown with me, or grown on me rather, over time. And I do kind of actually like how the panel is done in this one as well. I like how you can just press the Windows key or the Meta key or whatever it's called, and then you can just start typing in what program you want and go. So yeah, it's great. It's certainly one that I'd recommend. It's certainly a very good choice for people that want something that's Windows-esque, user-friendly, like GNOME 2 possibly, and who don't want to spend too much time faffing around with an operating system. If you've got a single monitor, it's near flawless, I would say. It depends what you consider. Also it takes into account it's not necessarily a lightweight lightweight desktop environment. But to me, it's lightweight enough that it doesn't sort of show up on, doesn't present any problems or anything like that. So guys, of course, I've really only managed to scratch the surface with Cinnamon here. I've been using it for months upon months, because I've been using Linux Mint for a long time now, and I've become very, very familiar with it. But like I say, I do enjoy using it, and I'd like to hear from you on this one as well. Again, I'm only one perspective, and I've got to admit, with my particular layout of dual monitors, it's perhaps not the most typical setup that I've got running as well. So feel free to leave your thoughts on Cinnamon down in the comments section below. If you have any recommendations you would like to see me try out, feel free to leave them, of course, down in the comment section below as well. But I will be pretty much aiming to try just about any desktop environment, and I'll be trying some of the lesser known ones as well, just to sort of have some juxtaposition in there. But thanks very much for watching. That's about it from me today. Until next time, I've been Chris Ware, and you've been awesome. Take care now.